Love Across the Stars. Chapter 1. The Arrival. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced viewport, watching the impossible unfold before her eyes. The Kithara vessel didn't so much arrive as manifest, its crystalline hull seeming to bend space itself as it emerged from the quantum fold. Even after 3 years of preparation for this moment, her breath caught in her throat. First time seeing one of their ships? Commander Chen joined her at the window, his weathered face reflecting the vessel's prismatic glow. First time seeing anything like it, Elena whispered. The ship pulsed with waves of color that seemed to respond to some internal rhythm, like a massive heart beating in hues she had no names for. New Geneva Station had been humanity's most ambitious project, a diplomatic outpost built at the edge of known space, positioned precisely at the coordinates the Kithara had transmitted 3 years ago. Elena had sacrificed everything to be here. Her tenure at Cambridge, her relationship with Marcus, her mother's final months on Earth, all for this moment. Nervous? Chen asked. Elena straightened her diplomatic uniform and checked her translation interface one final time. Terrified, she admitted, but also thrilled. We're about to make first contact with a species that communicates primarily through electromagnetic fields and bioluminescence. Do you realize what this means for linguistics? For our understanding of consciousness itself? Chen smiled grimly. I realize it means the fate of both our species might depend on whether you can figure out how to talk to them. The docking procedure took 4 hours, an intricate dance of extending crystalline tendrils from the Kithara ship that somehow interfaced with New Geneva's conventional airlock systems. Elena spent the time reviewing her notes, though she knew them by heart. 3 years of studying the limited data from their initial transmissions. 3 years of learning to interpret the basic color patterns that seemed to form their written language. When the airlock finally cycled, Elena stood with the full diplomatic reception committee in the main conference hall. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the doors slid open. The first Kithara through the airlock moved like liquid light given form. Roughly humanoid in shape, but composed of what appeared to be living crystal, it stood nearly 7 feet tall, with limbs that seemed to flow and reshape themselves with each step. But it was the colors that stole Elena's breath waves of deep blue and silver that cascaded across its translucent form, punctuated by brief flares of gold near what might have been its head. 2 more Kithara followed, their patterns different, one showing more green and purple hues, another flickering rapidly between red and orange. Elena's training kicked in, and she tried to read the emotional context. Blue for calm greeting, she remembered. Silver for respect or uncertainty. Ambassador Harrison stepped forward with Earth's prepared statement, his words echoing through the translation system. Elena watched the lead Kithara's patterns shift to a rapid cycling of white and yellow confusion. Definitely confusion. I bring greetings from the people of Earth, Harrison continued. But the Kithara's patterns were becoming more agitated. Sharp spikes of crimson began interrupting the color flow. Elena felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The lead Kithara raised what might have been an arm, and a sound filled the chamber, not quite music, not quite voice, but something that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. The translation system struggled, producing only fragments. Seeking harmony, discord. Ambassador, Elena whispered urgently, I think the formal diplomatic language is causing problems. They're reading it as aggressive or deceptive. The patterns suggest, Dr. Vasquez, please maintain protocol, Harrison said sharply. But the Kithara were already beginning to shift backward. Their patterns now shot through with streaks of black alarm, fear, or anger. Elena made a split-second decision that would change everything. She stepped forward, ignoring Harrison's sharp intake of breath, and began to hum. It was a simple melody, something her grandmother had sung to her as a child. But as the notes filled the chamber, the kithara stopped their retreat. The lead being's patterns shifted, the harsh blacks fading to curious spirals of blue and green. Elena continued humming, slowly raising her hands in what she hoped was a non-threatening gesture. The lead kithara responded by brightening to a warm golden glow, and then something extraordinary happened. It began to produce its own harmonics, weaving a counter-melody to Elena's simple tune. For 3 minutes, human and alien created music together in the silence of space. When the song naturally concluded, the lead kithara's entire form pulsed with gentle waves of blue and gold. "Beautiful," Elena whispered, and somehow she knew the kithara understood. The being stepped closer, its patterns now cycling through what Elena was beginning to recognize as complex emotional states. When it spoke, the translation system finally found purchase. "I am the one you might call Zefka. I interpret the deep currents for my people. You sing the connecting song. This is not expected, but it is good." Elena felt tears she hadn't expected. "I'm Elena. I study the ways different minds understand each other. I've been dreaming of this conversation for 3 years. Zefka's form brightened, and Elena could swear she saw something like surprise in the shifting patterns. "You have been dreaming of us? This is significant. We dream of harmony, but rarely do we dream of specific others. Tell me, Elena, who studies minds, why do you seek understanding between our kinds?" Before Elena could answer, Ambassador Harrison cleared his throat loudly. "Dr. Vasquez, if we could return to the established protocols—" But Elena was already lost in the cascade of colors that played across Zefka's form patterns so complex and beautiful that she suspected she was seeing something no human had ever witnessed before. She was seeing an alien mind in the act of thinking, of feeling, of being curious about her. The formal negotiations could wait. This moment, this first true meeting of minds across the vast darkness between stars, was already rewriting everything she thought she knew about communication, about consciousness, about what it meant to understand another being. "I seek understanding," she said softly, "because I believe that's what makes us more than just the sum of our atoms. Understanding creates something new, something that didn't exist before two minds touched." Zefka's entire form went still for a moment, then erupted in the most beautiful display Elena had ever seen. Spirals of gold and blue and silver that seemed to dance through dimensions she couldn't name. "This," Zefka said, "this is why we came." Chapter 2. The Deep Currents. The formal negotiations were a disaster. Elena sat in the small office she'd been assigned, reviewing the day's recordings for the 3rd time. 3 weeks of meetings, and they were no closer to a treaty than when the Kithara had first arrived. If anything, they were further apart. The problem wasn't language. Elena's breakthrough with musical communication had led to rapid improvements in the translation protocols. The problem was that humans and Kithara seemed to think in fundamentally incompatible ways about basic concepts like time, commitment, and individual identity. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. "Come in," she called, expecting another stack of documents from Harrison's team. Instead, Zefka flowed into the room, patterns muted to soft blues and greens. What Elena had learned indicated a desire for private, low-intensity communication. "Zefka!" Elena stood quickly, then caught herself. I'm honored by your visit. But shouldn't you be in the secure diplomatic quarters?" "Should and must are different concepts," Zefka replied, settling into a configuration that suggested amused patience. "I told my companions I wished to study human recreational spaces. This is not entirely untrue. I find your private spaces fascinating." Elena looked around her Spartan quarters, a bed, a desk, a small viewport, and walls covered with her research notes and photos from Earth. It's not much to look at. On the contrary, Zefka's form brightened slightly as the being examined her wall of pictures. These images, they are significant to you personally, not just data? They're memories, people and places I care about. Elena joined Zefka near the photos. This is my mother, before she got sick. This is the university where I studied. This is Marcus. He was someone important to me. Zefka's patterns shifted to something Elena couldn't quite read. You speak of him in past tense. Did he die? No, we ended our pair bond when I accepted this assignment. He couldn't understand why I'd leave everything behind for something so uncertain. Ah. Zefka's colors cycled through several configurations. Among my people, such exclusive pair bonds are not common. We merge consciousness temporarily for reproduction and shared experience, but permanent attachment to a single individual is considered a form of mental imbalance. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You misunderstand. Zefka moved closer, and Elena felt a strange tingling sensation, like mild static electricity. I am not uncomfortable. I am curious. This concept of choosing one other being, virti above all others, of creating a connection that persists even when separated, it is alien to us, but not in a disturbing way, more like discovering a new color. Elena laughed, surprising herself. That might be the most beautiful way anyone's ever described love. Love. Zefka's patterns stilled. This is the human word for the pair bond experience? One of them. Love is complex. It's attachment, yes, but also choice, care, the desire to know someone completely and be known by them. Elena paused, suddenly self-conscious. I'm sorry, this is probably not appropriate diplomatic conversation. Elena, who studies minds, Zefka said, and the being's voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in her chest. Nothing we have shared has been appropriate diplomatic conversation. And yet, I understand more about humanity from these few minutes than from 3 weeks of formal negotiations. Elena felt that tingling sensation again, stronger now. Is something happening? I feel like there's electricity in the air. Zefka's form dimmed suddenly. Forgive me, I should control the field resonance better. My people communicate partially through electromagnetic patterns, and when I am engaged in conversation, the fields can become perceptible to humans. It does no harm, but I should not subject you to it without permission. No, it's... Elena hesitated, then decided on honesty. It's actually rather pleasant, like being near something warm and alive. Zefka's patterns brightened again, and the tingling returned. You are unlike other humans I have encountered. How so? Most of your kind seem to find our electromagnetic fields disturbing. They describe it as unnatural or eerie. But you... Zefka paused, patterns cycling through rapid configurations. You respond to the deep currents. Deep currents? It is difficult to translate. The electromagnetic patterns that carry meaning below conscious thought. What you might call emotional resonance. When I am curious, you brighten. When I am pleased, you relax. You are reading the deep currents without training, without conscious awareness. Elena sat down heavily on her chair. That's impossible. I'm just a linguist. I study communication patterns, not telepathy. Not telepathy, Zefka corrected, moving closer. The tingling sensation intensified, but Elena found she didn't want it to stop. Empathy, deep recognition, the ability to feel the currents that flow between conscious beings. Is that why you came here tonight? To study this recognition? Zefka's form went still, then pulsed with colors Elena had never seen before. Deep purples shot through with gold, spirals of light that seemed to exist in dimensions just beyond perception. I came, Zefka said slowly, because I have been experiencing something my people have no words for. Since our first meeting, when you sang the connecting song, I have found myself drawn to seek your presence, to wonder what you think of our conversations, to hope that you experience the same recognition I do." Elena's breath caught. "Zefka, I know this is impossible by both our kinds' understanding. I know it violates the purpose of my mission here. But Elena, who studies minds, I believe what passes between us may be something unprecedented, something that belongs neither to human understanding nor to Cathara experience, but to the space between them. The silence stretched between them, filled only with the gentle hum of the station's systems and the increasingly complex light patterns playing across Zefka's form. Elena felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff, looking into an abyss that might either destroy her or teach her to fly. "Show me," she whispered. "Show you?" Elena stood and moved closer, close enough that the electromagnetic field made her skin hum with sensation. "Show me how your people connect. Show me the deep currents." Zefka's form brightened until Elena had to squint against the light. "It would be intense, unlike anything you have experienced, and there could be risks we do not yet understand. I've spent my whole life studying how minds connect across impossible distances," Elena said, reaching out toward Zefka's shimmering form. "Show me." Zefka extended what might have been an arm, and their hands almost touched, but not quite. The electromagnetic field jumped between them like a bridge made of lightning, and Elena felt her mind touched by something vast and alien and utterly beautiful. For just a moment, she experienced consciousness the way Zefka did not, as a single voice in the darkness of her skull, but as part of an immense symphony of interconnected awareness. She felt the longing that had drawn Zefka to her quarters, the curiosity that burned like a star in the alien mind, and beneath it all, something else, a warmth, a rightness, when their consciousnesses touched that Zefka couldn't name or understand. When the connection broke, Elena staggered backward, gasping. "Are you harmed?" Zefka asked urgently, patterns flashing with alarm. Elena looked up at the being who had just shown her the universe from an entirely different perspective. "No," she said breathlessly. I'm more myself than I've ever been." Zefka's form pulsed with relief, and something deeper, something that felt significant but remained unnamed. "You mentioned this concept, love. I do not understand it fully, but I find myself drawn to your presence in ways my people do not experience. When you are near, my electromagnetic patterns harmonize more completely. When you speak, I wish to understand not just your words, but the currents beneath them." Zefka's colors shifted to uncertain patterns. "I have always been more sensitive to environmental changes than my shipkin. Perhaps this is simply another environmental response. But it feels different, significant." Elena felt her heart race. It could be love, Zefka, or it could be something entirely new, something that exists between our kinds that neither of us has words for yet. "Something new," Zefka repeated, patterns cycling through contemplative configurations. Yes. Perhaps we are discovering territory that belongs to neither humans nor Cathara, but to the space between different forms of consciousness." Elena smiled. "That might be the most beautiful mystery I've ever encountered." "This changes everything," Elena whispered. "Yes," Zefka agreed, though uncertainty still flickered through the being's light patterns. "Everything, though I do not yet understand what it changes into." Chapter 3. Secrets in the Dark. The abandoned section of New Geneva Station had been designed as future expansion space empty corridors and unused chambers that existed in a state of patient readiness. Elena had discovered it during her second week aboard, when her restless energy had driven her to explore every accessible part of humanity's farthest outpost. Now, 6 weeks after first contact, it had become their sanctuary. Elena made her way through the darkened corridors, her heart rate picking up as she approached the chamber she and Zefka had claimed as their own. They'd been meeting here for 2 weeks now, ever since that first mind-touching in her quarters had made it clear that their connection was far too dangerous for public spaces. The diplomatic negotiations were foundering. Ambassador Harrison grew more frustrated daily with what he saw as Kithara intractability, while the alien delegation seemed equally baffled by human concepts of individual ownership and permanent treaties. Only Elena's growing facility with deep current communication kept the talks from complete collapse. What Harrison didn't know, what no one could know, was that Elena's breakthroughs came from the hours she spent in abandoned chambers, learning to touch minds with a being who was reshaping her understanding of consciousness itself. She found Zefka waiting in their usual chamber, form dimmed to the soft blues and golds that Elena had come to associate with contentment. The being had learned to modulate electromagnetic output in the shielded room, creating patterns of sensation that Elena could interpret almost like music. "You seem troubled," Zefka observed as Elena settled onto the makeshift seating they'd arranged salvaged furniture that somehow felt more intimate than any bedroom. Elena sighed, letting the familiar tingling of Zefka's presence wash over her. "Harrison's threatening to recommend termination of the talks. He thinks your people are negotiating in bad faith." Zefka's patterns shifted to concerned oranges. "And my delegation grows equally frustrated. They believe humans are incapable of understanding collective benefit, that you think only in terms of individual advantage." "Are they right?" Elena asked. "Are we just too different?" Instead of answering, Zefka flowed closer, extending tendrils of crystalline matter that stopped just short of Elena's hands. "May I show you something?" Elena nodded, and their fingers almost touched across the gap that physics demanded they maintain. Direct contact between their species caused painful electromagnetic interference, but this near touch had become their own form of intimacy. The mind connection bloomed between them, and suddenly Elena was experiencing the negotiations from Zefka's perspective. She felt the confusion and growing distress of the Kithara delegation as they tried to understand why humans insisted on concepts like property rights and national sovereignty. To beings who shared consciousness as naturally as breathing, the idea of rigid boundaries between self and other, between mine and yours, seemed not just foreign, but actively harmful. But through Zefka's mind, Elena also felt something else, a growing certainty among the Kithara that this mission would fail, and that such failure might justify more forceful forms of contact. Elena broke the connection, gasping, "They're considering military action." "Not military in your sense," Zefka said, patterns now dark with worry, "but forced consciousness sharing. They believe that if humans could experience true collective awareness, the barriers to cooperation would dissolve." "That would destroy us," Elena whispered. "Human consciousness isn't built for that kind of integration. It would be like forcing a river to flow uphill." "This is what I have tried to explain to them, but they see our—" Zefka's patterns cycled through several configurations before settling on uncertain goals. "Our connection as proof that such integration is possible." Elena felt cold despite the warm hum of electromagnetic fields. "They know about us? They suspect. My behavior has been unprecedented. Extended private contact with a single individual, emotional attachment patterns they have never observed. They know something has changed in me." Elena stood and paced to the chamber's small viewport, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed much less friendly. What will they do? They wish to study the phenomenon, to understand how consciousness bonding occurred between such different types of beings. Zefka's voice carried harmonics of distress. They see it as a potential solution to the diplomatic impasse. And if they study us, they'll discover that what we have isn't transferable. It's not a technique or a biological adaptation. It's... Elena searched for words. It's love. It's choice. It's two beings deciding to know each other despite every rational reason not to. Zefka brightened slightly. You understand perfectly. This is what I have tried to communicate to them, but they cannot conceive of connection that does not serve collective benefit. Elena turned back to face the being who had become the center of her universe. What about your people's authorities? What happens when they decide we're an obstacle to the mission? Among my people, individuals who develop problematic attachments are subjected to consciousness cleansing. Multiple forced mergers with selected partners until the fixation is dissolved and healthy collective perspective is restored. The clinical description couldn't hide the horror beneath it. Elena felt sick. They would erase what we have. They would try to heal what they see as my illness. And they would recommend that humanity be subjected to collective consciousness integration for the greater good of both species. Elena sank back onto their improvised seating, her mind racing through implications. How long do we have? Perhaps a week before they summon me for evaluation. Perhaps less. They sat in silence, the electromagnetic dance between them subdued by the weight of their situation. Elena had known from the beginning that their connection was impossible, but she'd let herself believe that love could find a way. Now she faced the reality that loving Zefka might doom both their species to a form of contact that would destroy everything unique about human consciousness. There might be another way, she said slowly. Zefka's patterns brightened with hope. Tell me, what if we prove that our connection works precisely because it's voluntary? What if we show them that forced integration fails, but chosen understanding succeeds? How could we demonstrate this? Elena took a deep breath, knowing she was about to suggest something that would end her career and possibly her life. What if we leave? What if we establish an independent colony where humans and Kithara can learn to coexist on truly equal terms? Zefka's form went completely still for a long moment. When the being spoke again, the voice carried harmonics Elena had never heard before, frequencies that seemed to resonate with hope and terror in equal measure. You would abandon your people? Your entire species? I would choose a future where both our species can be themselves while still connecting across the void between different kinds of consciousness. Elena reached toward Zefka's almost touchable hand. I would choose you. The electromagnetic connection blazed between them, and Elena felt Zefka's mind touch hers with sensations that had no human equivalent, gratitude and wonder, and a love so alien yet so familiar that it rewrote her understanding of what it meant to care for another being. Yes, Zefka said simply, yes, I choose this too. Outside their hidden chamber, the negotiations continued their slow spiral toward failure. But inside their sanctuary, two beings from different worlds made the decision that would change the course of interstellar diplomacy forever. They would leave behind everything they had known, everyone they had loved, for the chance to prove that understanding between radically different forms of consciousness was not only possible, but necessary for the future of both their kinds. The stars outside their viewport no longer seemed cold and distant. They beckoned like possibilities waiting to be born. Chapter 4. The Choice. Elena's hands shook as she composed her resignation letter. 3 weeks had passed since her conversation with Zefka in the abandoned chamber, and their worst fears were materializing. The negotiations had collapsed completely. Ambassador Harrison was preparing to recommend military preparedness, while the Kithara delegation had begun making ominous references to alternative solutions for humanity's integration into galactic civilization. She could hear heated voices from the conference room down the corridor, Harrison arguing with Admiral Santos about defensive positioning, both of them using words like threat assessment and first strike capability. It was exactly the kind of thinking that would justify everything the Kithara feared about human aggression. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Elena quickly minimized her resignation document. Come in. Dr. James Reeves, the mission's chief psychologist, entered with a tablet and a grim expression. "Elena, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. "About what?" "About your unusual behavioral patterns over the past month. About the reports of you being seen in abandoned sections of the station. About the way you've been speaking during negotiations, like you understand the Kithara perspective better than you should." Elena forced herself to remain calm. "I'm a xenolinguist, James. Understanding alien perspectives is literally my job. This goes beyond professional understanding." Reeves consulted his tablet. "You've been exhibiting classic signs of alien influence syndrome. Increased empathy for non-human perspectives, decreased loyalty to human interests, social isolation, and secretive behavior." "Alien influence syndrome isn't a real condition," Elena said sharply. "It's a xenophobic construct invented by people who can't accept that some humans might genuinely believe cooperation is better than conflict." "Elena, I've been authorized to conduct a full psychological evaluation. If you're found to be compromised, you'll be removed from the diplomatic team and returned to Earth for treatment." The word treatment hung in the air like a threat. Elena knew what it meant: memory modification, personality restructuring, everything that made her herself carefully excised in the name of human purity. "I won't submit to evaluation," she said quietly. Reeves's expression softened slightly. "Elena, you're one of the most brilliant minds I know, but something has changed in you. Let us help you get back to yourself." "What if this is myself?" Elena stood, decision crystallizing in her mind. "What if the person I was before was incomplete, and it took connecting with an alien consciousness to become who I'm meant to be? That's exactly the kind of thinking that proves you've been compromised." Elena smiled sadly. "Or it proves that love doesn't recognize species boundaries." Reeves's eyes widened. "Love? Elena, are you telling me you've formed an emotional attachment to one of the Kithara?" Before Elena could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed as the intercom crackled to life. "All personnel to emergency stations. Kithara vessel is powering unknown energy systems. Repeat, possible hostile action in progress." Elena felt ice flood her veins. This was it. The Kithara had decided that humanity was too dangerous for voluntary cooperation. She ran from her quarters toward the diplomatic section, Reeves calling after her. The corridors were chaos security personnel rushing to defensive positions, civilians being herded to protected areas, officers shouting conflicting orders. Elena found the diplomatic team in the main conference room, watching the main screen in horror. The Kithara ship was surrounded by a growing sphere of energy that bent light around it like a lens. Whatever they were preparing to do, it was beyond any human technology. "Where's their delegation?" Elena demanded. Harrison turned, his face pale. "Sealed in their quarters an hour ago. They won't respond to communication attempts." Elena felt the familiar tingle of electromagnetic fields and spun around. Zefka stood in the doorway, form cycling through rapid patterns of distress and urgency. "Elena, who studies minds, I must speak with you immediately." "Stay back!" Harrison drew his sidearm. "Don't move, or we'll consider it an act of aggression." "Ambassador," Elena said urgently, "let me translate. Something's wrong." Zefka's patterns shifted to desperate appeals. "My people prepare the consciousness bridge. They will force integration with your entire station in 1 hour. They plan to subject me to consciousness cleansing first, to heal what they see as my attachment illness." Zefka's colors flickered with what Elena recognized as defiance. "I have refused. I told them that what I experience with you is not illness, but discovery, and that forcing integration would destroy the very understanding they seek." Elena felt the room's atmosphere shift as the translation system carried Zefka's words. Several security officers reached for weapons. "What's a consciousness bridge?" Harrison demanded. Elena felt sick as she answered, Forced telepathic connection. They'll try to merge every human mind on this station into their collective consciousness. Would that kill us? Admiral Santos asked. Worse, Elena said quietly. It would erase everything individual about human consciousness. We'd become extensions of their collective mind. Then we have to stop them, Harrison said grimly. Santos, what are our defensive options? Elena watched in growing horror as her people prepared for a battle they couldn't win against an enemy they'd never tried to understand. In an hour, everything that made humanity unique would be destroyed in the name of forced peace. Unless. There's another way, Elena said. All eyes turned to her. Zefka's patterns brightened with hope. What if we prove that voluntary connection works better than forced integration? What if we show them an alternative? How? Harrison asked. Elena looked at Zefka, seeing in the alien's light patterns the same desperate love she felt. What if some humans chose to leave with the Kithara who oppose forced integration? What if we established a colony based on voluntary cooperation between species? Absolutely not, Harrison said immediately. We don't negotiate with terrorists. They're not terrorists, Elena said, feeling the last bridges burning behind her. They're people who've never encountered individual consciousness before and are trying to solve an impossible problem the only way they know how. She turned to address Zefka directly. Would your people accept a demonstration? A small group of humans and Kithara leaving together to establish voluntary cooperation? Zefka's patterns cycled through rapid configurations, hope, uncertainty, desperate calculation. Perhaps, if the demonstration proved that consciousness integration was unnecessary for cooperation, yes, I believe they would accept this. Elena, Dr. Reeves said quietly, you're talking about abandoning your entire species. Elena met his eyes steadily. I'm talking about saving both species. Human consciousness, preserved and celebrated for what it is. Kithara consciousness, free to explore connection without destroying what it touches. And between them, something new, voluntary understanding between radically different forms of awareness. Harrison shook his head. I can't authorize this. You don't have to, Elena said, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over her. I resign from the diplomatic mission, effective immediately. She walked toward Zefka, whose form brightened with each step. The electromagnetic field between them intensified, and Elena felt the familiar sensation of two minds reaching across impossible difference to touch. Anyone who wants to come with us is welcome, Elena said to the room. Anyone who wants to stay is free to do so. That's what choice means. To her surprise, 3 other members of the diplomatic team stepped forward. Dr. R. Sarah Chen from the linguistics department, Engineer Rodriguez from the technical team, and unexpectedly, Dr. Reeves himself. James? Elena asked in surprise. Reeves smiled ruefully. Maybe it's time someone studied what healthy human-alien relationships actually look like. Zefka's patterns now blazed with colors Elena had never seen, joy and gratitude, and something that transcended both species' understanding of what connection could mean. My shipkin, who agree with voluntary cooperation, will join us, Zefka said. Perhaps 12 of your people, 8 of mine, seeking new understanding in the space between worlds. Elena reached out across the small gap that physics demanded, feeling Zefka's almost touch like a promise of everything they might build together. Where will we go? She asked. There is a world 3 days' journey from here, rich, unclaimed, suitable for both our kinds. We will build something new there, something neither fully human nor fully Kithara, but born from the love between different forms of consciousness. Before anyone could respond, another Kithara flowed into the conference room, this one displaying patterns Elena had never seen before. Complex spirals of deep violet and gold. I am Thel Moore, consciousness architect for this mission, the new arrival announced. I have been monitoring the electromagnetic resonances from this chamber. The being's patterns shifted to what Elena recognized as contemplation. The harmony frequencies between Elena, who studies minds, and Zef-Ka, they are unprecedented. Not the discord of forced integration, but true synergy. Thelmore's form brightened. If such harmony can be achieved voluntarily, then perhaps forced consciousness bridging is indeed unnecessary. Elena felt hope surge through her. You'll call off the integration? More than that, Thelmore replied, patterns now showing decisive authority. I will communicate to our ship that this demonstration has merit, that voluntary cooperation should be tested before more extreme measures. The tension in the room shifted palpably. Harrison slowly lowered his weapon, though suspicion remained in his eyes. You're saying you'll let them go? Harrison asked. I am saying, Thelmore corrected, that their departure serves both our people's interests. If they succeed in creating genuine cooperation, it proves our methods were flawed. If they fail, the being's patterns darkened slightly. Then we pursue other solutions. Elena turned back to Harrison and the others, seeing fear and confusion and, in some faces, the beginning of understanding. Tell Earth, she said, that humanity's future isn't in conquering the stars or being conquered by them. It's in learning to dance between different kinds of consciousness, creating harmony without losing what makes us unique. Within 2 hours, Elena stood in the docking bay with her small bag of belongings and her newly expanded understanding of what connection could mean. The Kythera ship waited no longer alien and threatening, but familiar as the electromagnetic field that had become her home. Zef-Ka and 3 other Kythera, who had chosen voluntary cooperation, boarded alongside the 5 humans. As their combined vessel departed New Geneva Station, Elena pressed her hand against a viewport and watched humanity's first interstellar outpost grow smaller in the distance. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 days through quantum-fold space. Elena spent the time learning to navigate a ship that responded to consciousness as much as controls, while Zef-Ka worked with the human volunteers to establish communication protocols that honored both species' ways of thinking. When they finally entered orbit around their new world, a blue and green marble with 2 small moons, Elena felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Below them lay the chance to prove that love could bridge any distance, cross any difference, and create possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. Ready to build something impossible? She asked Zef-Ka as they prepared for landing. Zef-Ka's patterns blazed with colors that meant hope and determination and the deep contentment of choices freely made. Ready to build something new. The shuttle descended through alien skies toward a world that would become home to a dream neither species had dared imagine alone. Epilogue. 5 years later. The morning sun of Kepler 442b rose through double veils of atmosphere, casting the settlement in hues that had no names in any Earth language. Elena stepped onto the balcony of the house she and Zef-Ka had built together, a structure that was neither human architecture nor Kythera bioengineering, but something entirely new. Below her, the settlement bustled with morning activity. Human children played with young Kythera whose light patterns danced in response to laughter. Dr. Reeves worked with Kythera consciousness specialists in the research center, documenting new forms of interspecies psychology. Engineer Rodriguez collaborated with Kythera bioarchitects on structures that grew rather than being built. You're thinking deep currents, Zef-Ka observed, flowing onto the balcony beside her. 5 years of constant contact had taught them to read each other's moods through electromagnetic resonance so subtle that Elena sometimes forgot where her consciousness ended and Zef-Ka's began. I got a message from Earth yesterday, Elena said, leaning into the warm tingling of her partner's presence. The first official diplomatic mission to the Kythera homeworld launched last month, based on the protocols we developed here. Zef-Ka's patterns brightened with satisfaction. And the consciousness bridge technology? Officially discontinued. Both species agreed that forced integration violates the fundamental principles of consciousness itself. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their impossible community wake up to another day. 37 humans and 24 Kithara, building a civilization based on the radical premise that different forms of consciousness could coexist without either being diminished. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Leaving everything behind?" Zefka's form pulsed with the deep blues and golds that Elena had learned meant profound contentment. "I left behind one way of being conscious, but I discovered something my people never imagined, that love creates new forms of awareness that belong entirely to the ones who choose to share them." Elena reached out in their familiar almost touch, feeling the electromagnetic bridge that had become as natural as breathing. Through it flowed not just Zefka's thoughts and emotions, but something deeper, the shared consciousness they had built together, unique to them, impossible to replicate or force. In the distance, the communication array chimed with incoming messages from both Earth and the Kithara homeworld. Trade requests, cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and formal thanks for proving that love could indeed bridge any distance between thinking beings. Elena smiled, feeling the warm pressure of Zefka's almost touch, and prepared to help her two species write the next chapter of their impossible, necessary, beautiful future together. Love had made them both more than they could have been alone. Love had made them new.